Kwame's village lay nestled in the heart of the African savannah, where the sky stretched endlessly above, dotted with the occasional whisper of clouds. The earth, rich with the scent of damp soil and wild grass, had a way of grounding people, making them feel connected to something bigger. His home was simple, a mud hut with a thatched roof, its walls adorned with hand-carved wooden trinkets, and paintings depicting scenes from the village's history. The sun beat down in the afternoon, casting long shadows across the dry dirt paths that wound through the village, where children played and elders gathered under the shade of large baobab trees. Kwame was a man of humble means. His days began with the rooster's crow, followed by hours spent tending to his small plot of land. He wasn't wealthy by any means, but he had something that most people couldn't buy: peace. His life was quiet, rooted in the earth, with a heart that beat to the rhythm of the seasons. He had a wife, Adama, who had come into his life like a breath of fresh air. She'd been a stranger when they first met, but over the years, she had become the center of his world. Together, they built their simple home and lived day by day, content with their small joys. Adama, though, was different from the other women in the village. There was something quietly mysterious about her. Her eyes, deep and thoughtful, often seemed to look beyond the present, as if she were searching for something just out of reach. She was beautiful, but not in the way that demanded attention. Her beauty was subtle, like the grace of a bird in flight. She had arrived in the village years ago, not from wealth or privilege, but from a distant land filled with stories of riches and power that Kwame had never known. Their relationship, while filled with love, was also laced with an unspoken understanding. There were parts of Adama's past that she never spoke of. Kwame never pushed her to reveal them, sensing that some things were not meant to be shared, that the silence between them was a sacred space. Their connection was deep, built on trust, and the simple joy of being in each other's company. But that peace, that quiet certainty of their life together, was about to be shaken. One morning, as Kwame stood at the edge of their garden, wiping sweat from his brow after a long day of work, he noticed something was off. Adama had returned late the night before from a visit to her family, and while she greeted him with the same warm smile, there was an air about her that felt different. Her movements were slower, almost deliberate, and her eyes, which usually sparkled with an unspoken joy, were clouded with something Kwame couldn't quite place. At first, he thought it was simply fatigue. She had travelled long distances to see her family after all. But there was more to it. Her laughter, which had always come so easily, was quieter now, and her conversations lacked the same spark. When they sat down to eat, she barely touched her food, absent-mindedly pushing it around her plate. Kwame asked her if something was wrong, but she merely smiled and assured him that everything was fine. However, that smile never quite reached her eyes, and Kwame knew better than to ignore such things. The following day, he found himself watching her more closely. There were moments when she seemed lost in thought, staring at the horizon, as if she was seeing something only she could understand. And then there was the letter. Small, folded neatly under her belongings, written in a language Kwame didn't recognize. It was the first time he had seen her hide something so carefully. She had always been open with him before, sharing everything from her hopes to her fears. But this felt different. Kwame's heart sank as the realization began to settle in. Adama was hiding something from him, something that had to do with her family, and whatever it was, it seemed to be eating away at her, pulling her further away with every passing day. With each passing hour, his mind raced. What was it? Why did it feel as though she was slipping through his fingers? The peace that had once defined their life together now felt fragile, like a glass teetering on the edge of a table, ready to shatter. Kwame knew he had to find out what was going on, but a part of him feared what he might discover. Adama's life before she met Kwame seemed like a distant memory, buried deep inside her. But for her, it was a past that had never fully disappeared. Her childhood had been one of luxury and expectation, the kind that most people could only dream of. She was the only daughter of a powerful man, the chief of a prosperous village, far from the quiet life she now led. Her family was wealthy, influential, and well respected in their region, with lands that stretched for miles and riches beyond measure. From a young age, Adama had been groomed for a life of privilege, but not freedom. Her father, a man of tradition, had always spoken of the importance of alliances, of securing the family's power through strategic marriages. Adama was expected to marry a man chosen by her father, someone who could bring even more prestige to their name. He was a powerful merchant, wealthy and influential in his own right. Yet there was nothing about him that appealed to Adama, nothing that stirred the young woman's heart. He was cold, calculating, and his gaze never held kindness. She felt as if she were nothing more than a pawn in her father's game. Her mother, a quiet and submissive woman, never questioned the arrangements. She believed in the traditions of their people, and her only wish was for her daughter to live a life of security and respect. But Adama, with her sharp mind and independent spirit, could never accept the life her family planned for her. She longed for something different, something more than the walls of her father's house and the heavy expectations that came with her status. The day she turned 17, her father officially announced her engagement to the merchant. Adama's heart sank. She was being sold into a marriage that she didn't want, a future she had never chosen. Desperation took hold, and as the weeks went by, her unease turned into quiet rebellion. She began to plot her escape, knowing that she could not bear a life with the man her father had chosen for her. On the eve of her wedding, when her family was preoccupied with the final preparations, Adama slipped away unnoticed. She took nothing with her but the clothes on her back and the determination to live her own life. She walked for days, hiding in the forests and villages along the way, until finally she reached the small town where Kwame lived. It was a quiet place, far from the wealth and ambition of her family's world, and it was there that she met him. Kwame was unlike any man she had ever known. He was simple, kind, and hard-working, with an honesty that Adama had never seen in her world of deceit and obligation. There was no pressure on her to be anyone but herself. Kwame had nothing to offer in terms of wealth or status, but he gave her something much more valuable: freedom. When they met, it was as if the universe had conspired to bring them together. Their connection was instant, and despite the differences in their backgrounds, it was deep and real. For the first time in her life, Adama felt safe. She could breathe, live, and love without the weight of expectations bearing down on her. But she knew that her past could not stay hidden forever. Her family would come looking for her, and when they did, they would expect her to return. But in the years that followed, the love she shared with Kwame made her forget that future. She had a life with him, and for a while, it was enough. Kwame could feel the shift in the air. Something was wrong, though he didn't know what. Adama had become more distant in the days since her return. The woman who once eagerly shared her thoughts and dreams with him was now closed off, lost in herself. He tried to reach her, to ask her what was bothering her, but every time he did, she would reassure him with a gentle smile and a few quiet words. "I'm fine, Kwame. Everything is fine." The letter had been the first clue, and it weighed heavily on his mind. He had asked Adama about it, but she had dismissed his concerns with such practiced ease that he almost doubted himself. "It's nothing," she had said, her voice soft but firm. "A letter from an old friend." Yet, that explanation did not sit right with him. He could feel the tension growing between them, like a storm gathering on the horizon, but neither of them spoke of it. It was in the silence that had settled between them, in the way she no longer looked him in the eye when they talked, in the way she would sometimes lose herself in thought, staring out at the fields with an expression he couldn't read. Kwame spent his days working in the fields, but his mind was far from the crops. He found himself watching Adama more closely, noting the subtle changes in her behaviour, the way she would go silent when the village elders spoke of their own families, the way her gaze would shift whenever someone mentioned the past. It was as though there were pieces of her that she was hiding from him, parts of her life that she wasn't willing to share. His suspicions began to eat away at him. Why had she been so eager to visit her family? Why had she returned so distant, so changed? Why was she hiding that letter? Kwame knew that there was something more to the story, something that Adama was keeping from him. He had always trusted her, had always believed in their love. But now that trust was slipping. He tried to be patient, but the uncertainty gnawed at him. He wasn't the type of man to pry, but he knew that he couldn't go on living in the dark. His love for her made him question everything. Was it really just love? Or was there something deeper, something more complex buried beneath the surface? As the days passed, Kwame's fear grew. He could feel the distance between them widening, and with it, the weight of the unknown. What was Adama hiding from him, and what would happen if he uncovered the truth? Adama sat in the dim light of their small hut, her fingers nervously twisting a piece of cloth. Kwame, as always, was busy with the evening chores, but there was a heaviness in the air that neither of them could ignore. The distance between them, though unspoken, had become undeniable. She could see it in the way he watched her, the way he asked questions that were never fully answered, the way his eyes had grown more searching, more uncertain. For days, she'd kept the truth hidden, but it had become impossible to ignore. The burden of her past was too heavy, and she could no longer bear the weight of the lies that had been building between them. Finally, after a long silence, Adama spoke. Her voice was soft, but carried the weight of years of secrets. "Kwame, there's something I've been meaning to tell you," she began. Her hands trembled slightly, betraying the calm facade she had worked so hard to maintain. Kwame looked up, his brow furrowing in concern. "What is it, Adama?" he asked, his voice gentle, though his eyes were filled with apprehension. Adama paused, gathering the courage to speak. She had spent years running from this truth, years trying to bury the memories of her life before the village. But now, with Kwame's suspicion growing and the pressure mounting inside her, she knew there was no other choice. "I wasn't always the woman you know me to be," she began, her voice quivering slightly. "I grew up in a family of wealth and power. My father was a chief, one of the most influential men in our land. We had everything anyone could ever want: riches, land, status. But with that came expectations. Expectations that I could never meet." She paused, taking a deep breath. "I was promised to a man from another village, a powerful merchant, one who could bring more wealth and prestige to my family. I didn't have a say in the matter. My father believed it was the best thing for me, the best thing for our family. He told me it was an honor, but I never saw it that way." Kwame listened intently, his heart heavy with the weight of her words. He could feel the sadness in her voice, the pain of a woman who had never been given the chance to choose her own path. "I hated it," Adama continued, her voice breaking. "I hated everything about it. The life they had planned for me felt like a prison. I couldn't breathe. So when the time came, I ran away. I couldn't marry him. I couldn't live that life. I came here, to this village, because I wanted something real, something simple. And when I met you, Kwame, I thought I had found it. I thought I could leave all of that behind." The words hung in the air like a heavy fog. Kwame's heart was torn. He had always known that Adama was different, that she carried something with her, but he never imagined the weight of her past was this dark. He had loved her with all his heart, but now, as the truth unfolded, he felt a deep ache in his chest. But the worst was yet to come. "There's more," Adama whispered, her voice trembling. "My family. They want me to return. They've sent word. They want me to marry the merchant, the man they promised me to. They say I must fulfill my duty to them, to our family. If I don't, I'll be disowned. They'll cut me off from everything I know, from everything I've ever had. I've been running from them for so long, Kwame. And now they want me back." Kwame's world seemed to shatter around him. He stood there, unable to speak, as the weight of her confession settled like a stone in his stomach. He had always known there was something in Adama's past, something she was hiding. But this This was more than he could have ever imagined. She was not just the woman he loved, she was a woman torn between two worlds. A woman trapped by the expectations of a powerful family who saw her as nothing more than a pawn in their game. Kwame's mind raced, his emotions swirling in a tempest of anger, confusion and hurt. How could she have kept this from him for so long? How could she have allowed him to fall in love with someone who was already promised to another man? But amidst the rising storm of betrayal, another feeling emerged: love. His love for Adama had never been a simple thing. It had never been just about the woman she appeared to be. It was about her heart, her spirit, and the way she made him feel alive. The thought of losing her tore him apart, but at the same time, he understood her pain. She was trapped, not just by her family's expectations, but by her own fears, her own uncertainty about what would happen if she stayed with him. Kwame stood in silence, torn between his love for her and his feelings of betrayal. How could he ever trust her again, knowing that she had kept this secret from him for so long? But how could he let her go, knowing that her heart was as conflicted as his own? The silence stretched between them, heavy and unyielding. "I never wanted this, Kwame," Adama whispered, her voice barely audible. "I never wanted to hurt you, but now I don't know what to do. I don't know if I can go back to them, but I don't know if I can stay here either, knowing what I've left behind." Kwame's heart ached for her, for the pain that was evident in her eyes. He knew that Adama was not the woman she once was, not the girl who had run away from her past. But he also knew that he loved her, that no matter what she had hidden from him, he could not simply walk away. Yet, as the weight of her family's demands loomed over them, he couldn't help but wonder if their love was enough to overcome the forces that sought to tear them apart. Would she return to the life she had fled so many years ago? Or would she stay with him as the man who had given her freedom, but was now caught in the crossfire of a battle he didn't fully understand? Kwame knew one thing for sure: the path ahead was uncertain, but as he looked at Adama, his heart told him that he would do whatever it took to keep her by his side, even if it meant fighting against her past, against her family, and against everything that had tried to pull her away from him. Adama sat at the edge of their bed, her hands trembling in her lap. The letter from her family had arrived early that morning, and with it, the weight of her past had come crashing down on her. Her father's words, stern and commanding, were still fresh in her mind. "Return to us, Adama. Fulfill your duty. Marry the man we've chosen for you, or lose everything you've ever known." Her family had made it clear. She was no longer free to choose her path. The future they had planned for her was waiting, a future that promised wealth, security, and the return of her status. But at what cost? And yet, here she was, in the village she had chosen, with Kwame, the man who had given her everything she had ever wanted: peace, love, and freedom. Her heart ached as the decision weighed heavily on her. She had built a life with Kwame, a simple life that was everything her soul had longed for. But to stay with him meant cutting ties with her family, rejecting the life they had mapped out for her. She couldn't deny that her heart was torn. Kwame had never asked her to choose, but deep down, Adama knew the decision had to come soon. The village was beginning to talk, their whispers carrying the weight of the situation. People noticed the tension between them, and the elders, who had always respected her, began to question her loyalty to her new life. The pressure was mounting on every side. The village, small and intimate, buzzed with gossip. The news of Adama's predicament had spread quickly, and with it came the advice of well-meaning friends and neighbours. As always in tight-knit communities, everyone had an opinion, and everyone felt the need to share it. Adama couldn't escape their whispers. Everywhere she went, people watched her with curious eyes. The older women in the village, who had known the weight of family duty all their lives, offered their advice in hushed tones, their voices filled with the wisdom of tradition. "Adama," one of the elders said, her voice heavy with concern, "you are a daughter of great lineage. Your family's reputation must come before all else. Your father's wishes are not to be ignored. Another woman, whose own marriage had been arranged by her parents, added, You have been given a life of luxury, Adama. Your family expects you to fulfill your role. To leave them would be to dishonor your lineage. The words stung, but Adama tried not to show it. Her heart was heavy with the weight of the decisions she had to make. She'd worked so hard to carve out a life of her own, free from the constraints of her family's expectations. Yet, as she heard the voices of the village, the pull of her family's demands became even more pressing. The younger women, however, offered a different perspective. You have a choice, Adama, one of them said, her voice filled with hope. Kwame loves you. He doesn't care about your past. Follow your heart. It's your life to live. Their words brought her some comfort, but they also made the decision more difficult. Could she truly walk away from everything her family had built for her? The power, the wealth, the respect. Could she leave it all behind for a simple life with Kwame? And what if, one day, she regretted her decision? Everywhere she went, the pressure mounted. The village, though supportive, was divided. Some believed that love should conquer all, while others felt that family duty could not be so easily ignored. Kwame could feel the weight of the situation hanging over them. It had been days since Adama had received the letter from her family, and in that time, he had watched the quiet change in her. She seemed withdrawn, lost in thought, as if she were weighing a choice that would shape the rest of her life. He understood her dilemma, even if it cut him deeply. He had always known that Adama's past was complicated, that her family's influence stretched far beyond the small village they called home, but he had never imagined that the decision to stay with him could cost her so much. One evening, after dinner, Kwame sat beside her, his voice gentle. Adama, he began, his eyes searching hers. I see what's happening. I know what your family has asked of you, but you need to know something. He paused, gathering his thoughts. I love you, Adama, and whatever you decide, I will stand by you, but I cannot ask you to choose between us. If your heart is with them, I will let you go. I want what is best for you, even if that means it's not with me. Adama's heart broke at his words. She'd never wanted to hurt him, but the thought of leaving him, of choosing a life without him, felt like an impossible choice. Kwame, she whispered, her voice trembling, I never wanted this. I never wanted to choose between you and them. I love you, but my family, they don't see me as I am. They want me to return, to marry the man they chose for me. If I refuse, I lose them. I lose everything. Kwame took her hands in his grip firm yet tender. I will never be the one to make that decision for you, Adama. But I want you to know that whatever you choose, I will respect it. If you choose your family, I will understand. If you choose me, I will fight for you, for us. But you need to choose Adama, not just for them, not just for me, but for yourself. What do you truly want? Tears filled Adama's eyes as she looked at him. She wanted to say the words, I choose you. But the weight of her past was too great, and the promise of her family's future seemed too secure to let go of so easily. In the days that followed, Adama's heart was torn between two worlds. She could stay with Kwame, the man she loved, and live a life of simplicity, free from her family's control. Or she could return to her family, fulfill their expectations, and marry a man she had never chosen, all for the sake of duty. As the days passed, the reality of the choice she had to make became clearer. The love she shared with Kwame was undeniable, but so too was the loyalty she felt to her family, her heritage, and the responsibilities that came with her lineage. Kwame, seeing the internal struggle in her eyes, knew that the choice was not easy, but he also knew that love, true love, was not about holding someone back. It was about setting them free, no matter the cost. He had made his decision. He would not force her to choose him, but he would not stand in her way if her heart led her back to her family. If Adama chose to walk away from their life together, it would break him, but he would never stand in the way of her happiness. It was her choice to make, but he had already made peace with whatever that choice would be. The morning sun rose over the village, casting a soft, golden glow across the land. The birds began their songs, the sounds of the village awakening to a new day. But for Adama, the day had already begun, with a decision she had made in the silence of the night. She stood at the edge of their small hut, the wind carrying with it the sweet scent of the earth, and in her heart she felt a sense of clarity that she had never experienced before. Adama had chosen. She had chosen Kwame. She had chosen the simple life they had built together, the love they shared, and the freedom she had found in his arms. The decision had not been easy, and her heart still ached with the weight of the choice. Her family had disowned her, their final letter demanding that she return to them, or she would be cast aside forever. But Adama knew in that moment that her future did not lie with the family that had controlled her life for so long. Her future lay with Kwame, with the man who had loved her for who she truly was, not for the title or wealth she had once carried. The news of her decision spread through the village quickly. Some whispered that she had made a mistake, that she was turning her back on her family and everything she had known. Others, however, saw the strength in her choice. They saw a woman who had freed herself from the shackles of her past, a woman who had chosen love over duty, simplicity over wealth, and freedom over tradition. Kwame, too, felt a sense of peace wash over him. He had never wanted Adama to feel trapped between two worlds. He had never asked her to choose him. But when he had seen the fear in her eyes, the torment of a woman caught between love and duty, he had realized just how deep her sacrifice was. And now, as he looked at her, standing before him with her heart laid bare, he knew that their future would be shaped not by the past, but by the love they shared and the strength they had found in each other. Together, they set about rebuilding their life in the village. They worked side by side, planting crops, tending to the land, and caring for the animals. The simplicity of their life brought them a joy they had never known. Every morning, they would rise together, their hands meeting as they shared a quiet moment before the day began. Every evening, they would sit together by the fire, their hearts full, knowing that they had chosen each other above all else. Adama had lost her family, but in many ways, she had gained a new family in the village. The people who had once whispered behind her back now embraced her, offering support and friendship. The elders, who had once told her to return to her family, now saw the strength in her, the courage it took to live a life on her own terms. They respected her decision, even if they did not fully understand it. The village itself seemed to bloom in the wake of their renewed purpose. As Kwame and Adama worked together, they felt the weight of their love pulling them closer, binding them in a way that nothing else could. They built a life based on trust, respect, and the quiet joy of simple things. A meal shared, a field harvested, the sound of the wind through the trees. Adama, now free from the oppressive weight of her family's expectations, found herself rediscovering parts of herself she had long forgotten. She laughed more, smiled more, and even in the hard work of the fields, there was a lightness to her step. With Kwame beside her, she realized that true wealth had nothing to do with gold or status. It had everything to do with love, with choosing a life that made your heart sing, no matter how simple it was. As the seasons passed, their love only deepened. There were still challenges, as there always would be in life, but they faced them together with a resilience born of their commitment to each other. The bond they shared grew stronger with every passing day, and the village came to see them not just as a couple, but as a testament to the power of love, sacrifice, and the pursuit of happiness. In the quiet moments of the evening, when the fire crackled softly and the stars shone bright above them, Adama would rest her head on Kwame's shoulder and reflect on the journey that had brought them here. She had given up everything, her family, her past, the life she had known. But in return, she had found something far greater. She had found freedom, love, and a future that was entirely her own. Kwame too found himself reflecting on their journey. When he had first met Adama, he had never imagined that their love would lead them to this place. He had never imagined that their bond would be tested in such a profound way. But now, as he looked at the woman beside him, the woman who had chosen him despite everything, he knew that their love was unbreakable. Together they had weathered the storms, and together they would face whatever the future held. The story closed with Kwame and Adama standing together on the edge of their land, the sun setting behind them, casting a warm golden glow across the horizon. The future stretched out before them, full of possibilities. They had left behind the weight of the past, the expectations, and the burdens that had once threatened to tear them apart. Now, as they stood side by side, they faced the future with hope. Hope that their love would continue to guide them. Hope that they would build something lasting together. And hope that, in the end, their choice would prove to be the right one. In each other's arms, they had found a new beginning. A beginning free from the shackles of the past. A beginning built on love, trust, and the quiet strength of two hearts bound together. And as they faced the world, hand in hand, they knew that whatever came next, they would face it together, forever.